Hello. Tracy, sorry. The problem is I will not. There is no good recipe, a general recipe for price reduction, but in any case, I'll try to do my best to talk about possible ways to reduce prices. As you know, well, I'm sure many people in this room are involved into price reduction advocacy in one or another way, and those of you who are, I'm pretty sure you know that price reduction advocacy is a difficult task with results not easily achievable and not so many allies sometimes on your side. So part of my work in the organization is access to HCV and HCV treatment. And as you know, when it comes to access, the price is always one of the hottest issues. And in HCV field, as we see it today, it's basically a shining example of this trend. Because what we're witnessing now is a bunch of new revolutionary drugs basically changing the entire paradigm of treatment. From long injection-based treatment with, well, so to say, moderate cure rates to shorter oral treatment with much higher cure rates. So basically this is a treatment revolution, and no wonder such prices as $84,000 US per course of treatment, they come of course as a huge scandal, but sadly hardly as a huge surprise. So in my presentation, I will briefly touch upon the work ITPC-RU, the organization I come from, as well as other organizations in Russia are doing in Russia in order to try to reduce prices. And I'm sure that similar work, with some adjustments made with respect to cultural, social, economical, political issues could be made in other countries, and I'm sure such work is already being done. And so this slide will give you a short overview of the HCV situation in Russia. It's important to understand when it comes to advocating expanded access to treatment. So it's a very large epidemic with huge numbers, estimates ranging from 3 to 7 million people living with hepatitis C, with a population of 150 million people, so the prevalence is pretty high. So from this range, like from 3 to 7, you see that there is apparently no well-established, transparent system for collecting data about the number of people who need treatment, who are actually HCV co-infected, which is a big problem. The epidemic is mostly IDU-driven, and this is a group, as you probably know, fairly stigmatized in Russia, and a group which often escapes healthcare services. And the treatment landscape we have is quite diverse. We still have standard interferons used, we have pegylated interferons, and some limited access to older generation DAAs, such as boceprevir and telaprevir, and the new DAAs are currently almost unavailable with some exceptions. I know that treatment activists mostly talk about problems, but I think I should be fair and cover some positive things as well. So there is some government funding allocated, both federally and locally. Well, though the funding is mostly merged with HCV funding, but still there are competitor products on the market. As I have said, the market is quite diverse. There are opportunities for such interventions as compulsory licensing, some loopholes in the laws that make it possible to issue compulsory licensing, and there are opportunities for local generic production and patent opposition, the methods pharmaceutical companies are often fearing. So, as you see, the factors that influence price reduction are both favorable and not favorable. So in terms of favorable factors, so we have a very big demand. Potentially, we have opportunities for competition, which always drives the price down. And we have opportunities for some government interventions, but on the other hand, we have not very optimal statistics. And the awareness about the pricing issue and the hepatitis issue in general is fairly low. And there are some, well, registration hurdles, such as the necessity to perform clinical trials in Russia, which may be used by the companies as a justification for higher prices. So, as you see, the landscape is pretty diverse. So what we have is a very diverse picture in terms of the prices. Now, when you look at the picture, you may notice some interesting figures, such as price ranging from $8,600 to $17,000. And you know why? Because the procurement in Russia is decentralized, meaning that like 80 plus regions, they all conduct their own tenders with very different prices. So basically, when people ask me how much a treatment regimen in Russia costs, I tell you, I really don't know. I've been doing it for some years, and I still can't give you a good answer. How much a treatment regimen costs on average. The newer DAAs, the price for them is not regulated by the government as they're not included in the essential drug list. The prices here are closer to the European level. As you know, well, as you may know, Russia is a high-income country, which makes it difficult to advocate price reduction. What is good is that we have an alternative drug on the market, which is kind of a novel PEG interferon, which in the commercial sector costs less. So it costs about $7,000 US. Now, these figures still seem to be pretty high when we compare them to the successes people have had in Ukraine and in Georgia, in Egypt, in some other countries. But bearing in mind the fact that Russia is a high-income country, for some regions, yes, this is indeed a step forward. So what we have in terms of our advocacy goals in Russia is, of course, a separate national treatment program. There is a treatment program, but it's sort of merged with HIV, so we want a really separate budget line and, of course, improved treatment standards in general. And with an exclamation mark, reduce prices so that as many people as possible can afford that. So how do we advocate price reduction? Now, here I want to stop and really touch upon one thing, which is, well, it's a problem probably not only in Russia, but in some countries as well, that people, and by people I mean not only the general public, but also some decision makers, they take the price for granted. They say, okay, it costs, say, $10,000 US. Okay, this is fair enough. This is what we have to pay. So the government has to allocate money because this product costs as much. This is set in stone. This is the kind of attitude we often hear when we talk about the price, not only with the general public, not only with people, but also with people who are making decisions. They say, okay, this is the price, we have a special procedure for registering the price, it's stipulated by the law, there are costs. Of course, if you're talking to pharmaceutical companies, they'll tell you about the cost of clinical trials, the cost of development, the cost of everything. So the price is always, always has its own reasons. So this trend really has to be shifted. So we place a very, very strong focus in our advocacy to try to shift this paradigm. We have to talk about the fact that the price is too high. And this really has to be changed. It's important to bear in mind. So a classic advocacy kit, I won't go into too much detail on that. We have evidence-based, we put the monitoring efforts into reports, we do street actions, we have contacts with the media, and etc., etc. The important thing again here is to get the message about the high pricing and the high demand to the decision makers. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes when you speak about lowering prices, it's important to have some kind of benchmark. And for some campaigns, we chose the Egyptian price, which once was really a huge thing, a huge success. $2,000 per treatment per 84 weeks was really something huge at that time. So we decided we could go for that, with the thought that, of course, the price could go down even more. But sometimes it's nice to have some kind of benchmark. And through open letters, through demands to the government, through press conferences, media coverage, I'm sure you all know how to do advocacy, we really try to push this message forward about very, very high prices. And one of the successes we achieved that in one of the newspapers, on the World Hepatitis Day, there was a huge publication about exorbitantly high prices for Hep C treatment. And this is a success because on the World Hepatitis Day in Russia, the media is pretty much pharma-driven. So what the media is talking about is a general problem with hepatitis C, that there are drugs which may cure, there are awareness-raising campaign situations, etc., but no one is actually talking about a real problem of pricing. And what we really try to do is we try to get it into the agenda as much as possible. So this was a pretty good success. It came as a surprise, this article. So to sum it all up, unfortunately, Tracy, I will not be very, very optimistic. I will not say, okay, we've managed to get the price down to $1,000 per treatment. I will not say that, sorry, unfortunately. But the important thing is that the tendency we see that the price is gradually going down, actually. If we compare it to like 2 years' time, 3 years' time, we see a constant trend of the price going down. Of course, we know, and we have to be honest, that the real price drivers are generic competition and government interventions, not the goodwill of the companies. You may, of course, try to persuade them to reduce the prices. They will say, yes, of course, we're doing the best we can, but you know, we have to take into account such and such and such things. So basically, combined with the efforts of the civil society and the tendencies on the market, so we see now such prices as, for instance, $8,000 per treatment cost, which was, well, impossible 3-4 years ago. And other focuses in our advocacy is to do the same for the newer revolutionary drugs, because there is no way it should cost $84,000 or $60,000 or whatever. The price has to be fair. And again, this message has to really get through to the decision makers, with the thought that as many people as possible should have access to treatment. And we all have to admit that price is probably the key barrier here at this moment in the hepatitis C field. And our work as a civil society is really to make sure this message gets through, and we really need to keep the pressure going. Thank you very much.